Hello and welcome to the Connected Airspace of Tomorrow, brought to you by GDIT. I'm your host, George Jackson. The U.S. has the largest and most diverse aviation system in the world, but the tools it uses to manage that system face new vulnerabilities and challenges. The Federal Aviation Administration is investing in technology designed to improve communications and IT networks in the most efficient way possible. In this dispatch from ATCA Global, the Air Traffic Control Association's Conference and Expo in Washington, D.C., we'll dig deeper into some strategies and solutions that pave the way for a national airspace system of the next generation. Mark DiNiccolo is Vice President of the Program Management Organization at FAA. Welcome, sir. Good to see you.
Good to be here. Thanks, George.
His colleague on our panel, Mariano Alicea, Vice President Aviation, GDIT. Good to see you as well.
Good afternoon, George. Good to see you as well.
So give us some context for this conversation, Mark. Modernization, FAA, it can become a bit of a buzzword. What does it mean to you and the PMO for the NAS?
Yeah, so modernization to me, the meaning of that is making sure that we continue to advance our national airspace system, the NAS, so that it can keep up with the demands of the aviation system. Right? They're always increasing. There's always stresses on us. Maintaining the system that we have is a big stressor for us. Keeping up with the cybersecurity advancements, that's a big one for us. And then making sure that we keep pace with the new entrants that are coming into the NAS. So drones and commercial space activities, urban air mobility, advanced air mobility, all those things are part of the modernization challenges that we have that we need to continue to make sure we address so that we can keep pace with what's needed for the American public.
Mariano, that demand has been pretty dynamic over the past 3 years. I mean, what does modernization mean to you, and what do that 3-year period, how has that changed the industry since ATCA just came back together?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I would have to say that modernization really is about a partnership. The agency in partnership with industry in terms of looking at the forecast, what needs to change, how it can change, how to invest smartly so that we can bring the solutions to bear that the agency is looking for. Over the last 3 years, it has been a different challenge. We're delighted that we were able to support the agency in video conferencing capabilities that really enable the agency to continue to deliver its mission utilizing Zoom platforms and Teams platforms. So video conferencing, unified comms has really been an enabler. I think we've seen over the last 3 years that we've been able to stay focused on the mission, work through acquisition changes, and continue the modernization of the NAS. So,
yeah, it's interesting you say that because you talk about modernization, you think about the equipment that's out in the field, the radars, the comm systems, but the comm systems that we have amongst the headquarters folks to make sure that we can operate effectively in this new environment is just as critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Cybersecurity, as you mentioned, sir, navigates through everything. What are some of the top cyber priorities for the PMO?
Yeah, so something that's happening as the cyber environment evolves, it becomes more and more challenging. So something that's happening to us is a lot of our key systems, the classification that we have, the security classification that we have from our systems, they don't go down. They go the other way. They go to a higher level, right? So we're seeing a trend there for good reason, right? Because there's cybersecurity threats that we have to make sure we respond to. But the challenge with doing that is, as you raise the security classification for a system, that's expensive, right? It means more upgrades, upgrading the operating systems on a more regular basis, upgrading the hardware so it can accommodate those new operating systems, all things that are costly. So that's a key challenge for us, is staying ahead of that so that we can budget and plan appropriately so we can get the security fixes and address the security vulnerabilities in place in a timely fashion.
George, that's the double-edged sword. That's the double-edged sword about cybersecurity and the modernization of the NAS. When Mark and I both started, the NAS was a closed system. It was very point-to-point, and the idea of opening it up to the internet was crazy. Now it has to. There is such an influx of new entrants, commercial space, bringing capabilities to the forefront. You have to share that data. The infocentric NAS is something that is pushing that envelope. So therefore you're exposing a lot of systems that previously hadn't. So that continued positioning for resilience, for protection, for identification, for zero trust is really something else that's pretty exciting about delivering the modern NASA today.
Who are the partners involved in that ecosystem? Clearly FAA, other agencies like NASA, the contracting community. Who else is involved there?
Well, DoD, right?
Yes.
So, and then the airlines, right? And there are key stakeholders between the FAA, industry, aircraft operators, and the DoD. That's the key. That's the key footprint. I'm probably missing one or two, but they're the ones that come to mind.
Is there that mindset, Mariano, of rising tide lifts all boats regarding cybersecurity in that area?
Yeah, I think so. Others in the intelligence community are a big partner. The aviation ISAC, another source of data, is very important to open up the aperture, get as much information about what the adversary is up to, what are those digital signatures, how do you prepare for those? So that collaboration across all of those industry groups and government groups is extremely important. So as each of those gets smarter about what that threat is, then we can all benefit from it. We learn lessons, we look at certifications, we bring our staff to the forefront of the challenge. It really is all hands on deck in the cyber world.
The discussions on the main stage, even in the hallways around this area, there's a lot of change around the NAS or NAS right now. You know, you mentioned unmanned systems. There are certainly other areas. You've been at this for a few years now. Is this a time of more change than ever?
Yeah, yes. With the new entrants that are coming in, with the drones and especially commercial space, just an incredible amount of change. So, when drones first started getting introduced into the National Airspace System a while ago, and actually, I don't even call drones new entrants anymore. They've been around long enough that they're not new anymore. So, I'll admit, we were a little bit behind the curve, when they first came in. We've caught up with that, but now we got to make sure we stay ahead of that curve with the commercial space. The number of commercial space launches is just increasing at an exponential rate. So we need to make sure that we can accommodate that change. And something that doesn't always ring true with folks who aren't involved in this on a day-to-day basis, like FAA, why do you care about commercial space? That's NASA, right? That's space stuff. Well, they have to fly through our space to get there, our airspace to get there. We need to make sure that there is a protected area for commercial space launches so that if an aircraft is flying near the vicinity, well, we get them out of the way, right? So those types of changes, and then the amount and the speed at which the new entrants are hitting the National Airspace System is something that is really, really different than it has been in the past. Just the amount of change, yes, the rate of change, I think is the key difference.
What's the potential there, Mariano? If the National Airspace, if you do this right, what happens? What does the industry win? What does the American public win?
I think there's an entirely new economy that the UAV or the drone market is just waiting for all of the regulations, all the technologies to enable that to happen. Whether it's delivery of pharmaceuticals, whether it's package delivery, whether it's continued ag services where folks are surveying farm fields to know how much fertilizer, what kind of fertilizer. There's an entire economy that's just waiting to explode. And I think the FAA is really leading in many regards to ensure that explosion happens safely, happens securely. If you're going to fly commercially a drone, you need to register it. You have to have certifications just like a regular pilot would. So I think the agency, again, is leading the way and having this balanced role between the safety regulator and the promoter and operator of aviation, whether it's in a 3-pound drone or it's in a 777. And so I think there's a lot more to happen there. Information is critical for those drone operators as well, and communication links are critical because you have to be able to engage with the operator, know where that craft is, and have that data be presented in a meaningful way so it's safe for the rest of the traditional NAS, if I can say that.
I'll note that there's a lot of other emerging areas that you're tracking right now. Air taxis, electric vehicle takeoff and landing, or eVolt. I mean, these sound really exciting, but it's not limited to UAS. Can you talk a little bit about how complicated that landscape is?
Yes, so there's a couple different areas of complication, right? One is just the certification of those different types of vehicles, especially if it's one you're going to put a person in, right? So there's the certification piece of it, but then also as complicated is the integration of those vehicles into the NAS. So do we have separate airspace for them? Are they integrated in with everything else that's going on? Do we have time periods? How do we share the airspace with all of these different types of technologies that are coming? So, part of the concept is, there's going to be an air taxi where you can, a person can get in this air taxi and fly from point A to point B, or maybe fly from, a building down around the corner from your house to an airport where you can then pick up a traditional airliner and fly somewhere else. So, also in that airspace is the general aviation, commercial space, the drones that are flying out there currently. Right. So how do we get that all coordinated in a safe manner?
Mariano, something resonated in there for you. Do you want to foot stomp or add anything to Mark said?
Yeah, I do think it's the rate of change. Earlier you said it's the rate of change. And I think that rate of change really pushes policies, it pushes acquisitions, it pushes regulation. But it should also continue to drive dialogue. And this event is a great example of the dialogue that's happening across industry, with the Defense Department, with other international partners who too are part of this ecosystem. But the NAS isn't alone. It's one ANSP in a global ANSP. And I think that international leadership is also critical because they have introduced and are delivering capabilities in the UAV or UAM environment, perhaps a little bit further ahead than the agency is here. But that dialogue is so critical. So I'm delighted that we're back together again. It seems like such a long time. And I think we're all benefiting from kind of the return. So.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Mark, I'm going to talk to your colleague, Nitesh Manikoth, the Chief Data Officer, later on in this program. So we don't have to get too IT-centric here, but a phrase that we commonly hear covering IT issues is breaking down silos. How is the PMO helping to navigate that across FAA at a time when there's more data at your hands than ever?
Yeah, George, breaking down the silos, and there's lots of different connotations to that, right? Because you think of it from a technical perspective, but I'm going to stay away from that because I'm sure Nitesh will handle all that. But breaking down the silos from an IT perspective, it's change. Change is the hard part, and a lot of times it's not the technology; it's the cultural change of the people. How do you make that change? So, for instance, one of the things that we need to go through in the FAA is a mission support or a mission support cloud technology, right? I'm not talking about mission critical yet. I mean, we got to get to mission critical eventually, but for a support system, how do we get to that type of cloud technology? And there's lots of different perspectives on that. There's lots of different concerns. Security, like we talked about, is a key one as well. If we're going to operate in silos where everybody has their own piece of that puzzle without talking to each other, we're not going to be successful, right? That's not how change happens, right? We're going to have to make sure that we break down those silos, talk across the different organizations who are stakeholders and have responsibilities there in order to make that change that the NAS needs to realize the transformation that is needed for things like moving to cloud technology. And, we're very secure, we're very comfortable in the way we do things right now, where we have our independent systems. Some of them are very monolithic, like with our automation systems and things like that. So it's a huge cultural shift that we're going to have to overcome.
Yeah, it's definitely a federated data challenge. There are going to be producers and consumers of the data. They have to be shared. They have to be shared in a way that's meaningful, it's timely, it's accurate. So it's very federated, and we're part of that solution today for the agency. We're happy to continue to provide support to EIM. But I do think that part of that federation and data sharing comes responsibility. It's back to that cybersecurity issue. How much of that data is available and to whom? And how do you trust and who do you trust? And how is that data going to be put to use? And that is part of that technical silo that I think you were talking about.
And how do we make that transformation in a cost-effective manner?
Oh, yeah.
That's the hard part.
Yeah, absolutely.
This event, ATCA, took a brief break for COVID. It's back for the first time in 3 years. I have not been here at prior engagements, but it looks like there's more space on the agenda than ever. Can you talk about that pairing, FAA, Space Force, and NASA? I mean, how is space impacting the industry generally?
Well, a little bit like I said earlier, George, right? The number of space launches that we have is just increasing exponentially. And that impact on the NAS is significant. If you think about a typical launch of a commercial space or even a government space vehicle that goes off the Cape, right, where we, it's one of our traditions. There's lots of places around the country, but think off the Cape. All right, so there's a launch window there that is typically several hours long. And from the FAA's perspective, from a safety perspective, we're not going to fly an aircraft underneath the projected trajectory of that space vehicle, right? Because what if something goes wrong, right? We can't risk the lives of people. So we either have to stop or we have to take the aircraft and push them inland into Florida. Okay, so that's more time and fuel for the airlines. Not to mention the fact we're talking about Florida here. There's a lot of thunderstorms in Florida over the land, so those types of things complicate the scenario. So we can do it, it can be done, but it can't be siloed, and it has to be that collaborative type of effort. So how do we make sure that we make the best use of the airspace and the resources we have to accommodate all the different users of that airspace?
What about commercial space travel? How is that going to impact the industry?
Oh gosh, I don't even know where to begin with that one, really. I just can't imagine that maybe in my lifetime, I don't know if I'm lucky enough, where that will be a reality. Whether it's space tourism, just kind of like William Shatner getting to take a look at the big blue and see what that response is. I think the issue that Mark was identifying, though, around commercial space and the increased number of launches, where they're launching from, there are more and more spaceport applications ongoing. You do have to protect the lower 48. In that case, literally the lower 48, just from an eventual or potential accident. You want to make sure that's safe. But it also goes to why the power of sort of high performance computing, AI and ML, so you can get smarter about the windows. Is that 4-hour window really needed? Is that because we're not working through enough of the problem set to give a better precision as to when that launch window is and what will be the recovery time? So IT and engineering is really part and parcel of all of that. As we can get more efficient in those windows, then everybody's happy. The FAA isn't rerouting traffic for 2 hours in advance. You can open that window, you can get better weather forecasting and give the launch signal with greater accuracy and assurance, and then we're off and running. It's an interesting time that so many of the technologies that are here can be brought to any one of the problems that you've been talking about, or maybe I should say opportunities.
Yeah, because one of the things we're trying to do, and you hit the nail on the head, when there's a commercial space launch, we block off a big piece of airspace. Yeah. But if we had the technology, and we can get there, we will get there, but we need the technology where it's small places, small block of the airspace that moves with the launch vehicle as it tracks through the airspace.
That's right.
People, clearly central to everything we've covered today. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's an exciting time in aviation, commercial space, UAVs, cyber, AI, ML. It's an industry that's alive and well. We hope we continue to draw the top talent from around the country, frankly from around the world. We need it. Every challenge is in front of us. It's timely. We need that kind of innovation from all over, from all the disciplines, whether it's a science discipline, an engineering discipline, even in acquisition and business and finance. These are big business problems and big business challenges, and this is an exciting place to bring those skills to bear. You can develop a really nice career and maybe benefit all of us in the end.
Mission is inherent to government. I mean, it's part of one of the key recruiting factors for every agency across the administration. What do you need most right now, Mark, from a people perspective?
I need different perspectives. I need all the different perspectives that's representative of the population of the United States. We need diversity, we need innovation, we need ideas. We need folks who are experienced, and we need folks who are just getting out of college and coming into the workforce. Right? That innovation is key, because as we talked about, with the pace of change that we are realizing, the old ways of doing business are just not going to hold up anymore. So we have to constantly think of new ways to modernize and keep up with the pace of technology. And the way we do that is by adding to the great folks that we have on our staff already.
We've covered a ton of ground in this conversation. Modernization, cybersecurity, new entrants into the NAS. Tie a bow on this for us, Mark. The PMO sits at a really crucial juncture for the FAA. You're traffic cop for a lot of different areas of the organization. If FAA is doing all of that successfully, if the PMO is doing all of that successfully and integrating a lot of these really dynamic elements, what does success look like? What does it look like in a year, 2 years, 5 years?
So a year, 2 years, 5 years. I'm going to start with the farthest out one, the 5 years. So 5 years from now, we are getting to a point where we are able to modernize the NAS in ways that we are not modernizing it like right now. For instance, I talked about it earlier, the big monolithic systems. No, we're getting to a point where we're starting to put some of our technology into a mission support cloud. So we don't have huge contracts that we let out to one person, right? Instead, we're in the cloud technology. So we have a baseline operating system that now is available and an opportunity for multiple different organizations to say, all right, and here's an app that I'm going to put on that to aid the FAA for any particular reason, whether it be something that's like maybe a weather forecasting or a conflict probe type of technology. So that's what the long-term plan needs to be for the FAA in order to ensure our success and modernization in the years to come.
Mark, Mariano, thanks for your time.
All right,
George.
Thank you.
How will aviation leaders ensure a new level of workforce readiness, and how will data pave the way? More modernization conversations from ATCA Global 2022 next. I'll be right back.
With nearly 5 decades of support through all phases of flight, GDIT is all about solutions for the FAA, supporting the mission now to the future and beyond. Whether it's designing and maintaining software used every day to safely manage domestic airspace, modernizing the national airspace system with intelligent automation, providing the only air traffic control radios certified to operate in the NAS, securing mission-critical networks and providing cost-effective enterprise cloud infrastructure, or managing air traffic management simulations for over 20 years. GDIT is proud to serve as a strategic partner to the FAA. When it comes to safe skies and the 1 billion plus U.S. passengers who fly every year, GDIT is committed from the ground to 60,000 feet.
Welcome back to the Connected Airspace of Tomorrow, a dispatch from ATCA Global 2022. I'm George Jackson. The most effective IT modernization efforts start with a strong data management strategy. Data can optimize operations at an organization by improving workforce productivity, spurring innovation, or solving tough problems quickly. All of those elements start with a strong digital foundation. Nitesh Manikoth is Chief Data Officer, FAA, Ben Gianni, Chief Technology Officer at GDIT. Welcome both. Nitesh, let's jump right in. We're talking modernization today. I heard the keynote here at ATCA Annual. NASA's Deputy Administrator talked about airspace generally, the evolution, what's really exciting and out there right now. What about your part of that portfolio? Where does modernization meet FAA right now?
So modernization, as you know, the Next Gen program, major elements of that are already deployed. So the next phase of it, what's called the infocentric NAS, you will see a lot about it in the conference here. Core to that is data and data modernization. So that is the primary stage where we are. So what is different now in terms of modernization? The available technology, AI, machine learning, cloud computing, augmented analytical techniques, all of these have kind of converged to make it an exciting time for an info-centric approach to modernization. That is where we are today. And what Ms. Melroy said in the keynote there kind of points to a very interesting phase in aviation, aerospace in general. There's so much innovation happening in the industry that FAA has to be prepared to support that innovation. So that's where we are from a modernization perspective.
If I could stay with you for a moment, Nitesh, brag on the agency a little bit. What are some success stories over the past 2-3 years in those areas? You mentioned a lot: cloud computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, next gen. What stands out as where the FAA business regarding modernization is doing something really right now?
I would say that not enough is said about what NextGen has brought to the whole aviation ecosystem. A variety of major programs are in the field. Folks are taking advantage of it. But some of the more recent advances, FAA has done major work in adopting cloud technologies. GDIT has been a great partner in that. On the data side, we have deployed a cloud data platform to enable all of FAA throughout to make better decisions using data. Data has been core to aviation forever. It's nothing new. It is in the DNA for the aviation industry. One would claim that the Wright brothers, going back all the way, had their success because of their attention to understanding how airfoils worked and the data-driven approach to design of those things. So from aircraft design to operational efficiencies, data has been core in aviation. So recently we have had major success in moving data into the cloud and sharing data across the FAA. It's not enough to just share within FAA, but with our partners as well. And many of the progress which you see, many of the success which you see is related to that sharing of data and greater attention to the needs of partners in having relevant information at the right time to make better decisions both on safety and operational efficiency.
Ben, I want to talk about people in a moment here and where they fit into that data evolution. But before I do, anything that you want to foot stomp or build on for what Nitesh has laid out there?
Well, first of all, George, thanks for having me. It's great to be here with Nitesh and the FAA and the GDIT FAA team. Nitesh talked about the data-centric enterprise, right? And data-driven. He writes a lot about software and data-driven enterprises, and that's really what it's about. When you think about the question of talent and how do you attract and retain good talent, how do you maximize their skills? We talk a lot about having people come into the technology industry, whether they be early career types or military veterans coming into the private sector, or really somebody starting a new career. They want to have a great experience, right, with technology. And so what that means to some, especially in the software development environment, is that they don't want to do work in the technology that's not seen. It doesn't have a tangible impact, right, to a mission like the FAA's around safety, efficiency, and functionality, right? They want to be able to come in, interoperate with the technology stack, use the data in the enterprise, apply their code, their logic, their talents, and see immediately a result in terms of the mission, right? And so that's an experience that makes a difference when trying to attract and retain talent. And it also allows them to maximize their skill level and their experience in such a mission, especially early career types coming into the IT business, right, looks at a mission like the FAA's very exciting, right? And so we want to leverage that with our technology capabilities and give them what they can use, right, to make a tangible impact early. And that motivates them in their careers, could potentially define a career path for them, right? And also allows them to be mobile, right, when they come into the industry and move about the industry and not leave it. Hopefully move about the company and not leave it as well.
Ben uses the word experience, Nitesh. I'll note that OMB has had several directives come out over the past few years on customer experience, and you could take that phrase and look externally to an organization, how an agency is interacting with the citizens it serves, but experience also applies to the employees themselves. Could you talk a little bit about that connection and how it ties to modernization? How does the experience that you and your team at FAA, how do you help drive that for better outcomes for the organization?
Great question. So experience of the employees, how easy it is to get your job done, is important to how you deliver on the mission. If you leave friction in any of the processes or any of the interactions within the organization, then you are kind of taking away from their ability to fully focus on the mission and deliver. So employee experience is extremely important. In fact, within the IT organization's priorities within FAA, employee experience is a key pillar, has been since about 2017. It is one of the 7 priorities this year. Meaning that throughout FAA, and COVID helped here because everybody had to work from home, so the digital experience had to improve substantially. So throughout, whether it is how do you connect and work with the systems at FAA, or how do you interact with your partners throughout the country, because most of this remote work experience requires technology to be there. It should not be in the front, it should be hidden and behind, and but that employee experience, continuously improving that employee experience is important, because the more you can take away any kind of friction in the processes, the better equipped and easier and more joyful the work environment becomes, right? So if you don't intentionally focus on it, it might happen, but it has to be a focus for leadership. For shared service organizations like IT, it has to be a focus. And gladly, it is for FAA.
If I'm reading between the lines of Nitesh's remarks, also the keynote that kind of kicked off today's programming, data driving through that experience, Ben, strikes me as an area of great opportunity, of promise for the aviation industry generally. Am I reading that right?
I think you're definitely reading that right, George. Data, the existence of a data plane and a technology architecture in an agency like the FAA is so important to be able to understand what data they're in command of, right? Data ownership these days is a key criteria for businesses, right? And so having an agency like the FAA understand the data layer, know what data they've got, who should access that data, what they should be doing with that data, but also in terms of collaboration with industry, sharing that data so everybody can get on the same page, right, allows maximum efficiency of the operations, right? When you talk about data, not far behind is software, right? And so whether you're using a software factory or whether you're applying artificial intelligence, machine learning tools, to that data, having instant access to the data, from those capabilities is something that we believe is needed in the industry. We're investing in those capabilities and seeing great feedback in terms of that type of investment. And data is what fuels the modern enterprise. And so we have to treat it, with the respect that it deserves in terms of applying solid, zero trust enabled, for example, cybersecurity practices, to that data, so it is only used for what it's intended to be used, and only for those who are legitimately authorized and validated to be using it.
Yeah. I don't want to get too esoteric here too early, Nitesh, but the CTO's role, a big piece of that is innovation. You're responsible for being creative, figuring out new ways that the organization can move forward in areas like data, like modernization. How do you foster that? Is it partnerships? Is it internal efforts? Is it all of the above?
All of the above is the right answer. When I took on the CDO job, one of the first things which we did was run an internal idea challenge back in 2017 to kind of encourage people to think innovatively. So it was an idea, folks didn't have to have an instantiated idea. They had to bring the idea to the table. That way we could understand what data would be required for it, what tools would be required for it. currently, just to give a shout out, we are running a data challenge for students, graduate, undergraduate students, for FAA-related mission space. So whether it is improving safety using data, whether it is improving operational efficiency. So we announced this a couple of weeks ago, an FAA data challenge open to all university students. You have to do that. You have to look for innovation from outside, but you have to continuously do innovation efforts internally as well, because the folks within FAA know the business problems. There might be a lot of folks outside FAA who can contribute to that, but the folks outside don't always know the details of the problems that folks inside are facing. So you have to encourage innovation, innovative thinking throughout. It's not driven from top. It has to be part of everything which we do. Whatever mundane job you're doing, whether it's in HR or IT or whatever, or in the mission space, when you're trying to have a safer NAS or a more efficient NAS, it has to permeate everything which you do. You have to continuously be thinking about better and better ways of doing what we're doing. Because the industry is innovating. FAA cannot stand still, right? So,
talk about that industry element, Ben. Where does industry most effectively come in there? What could kind of enhance that relationship going forward?
Great question, George. Collaboration between industry and government and academia. We crowdsource good ideas at GDIT because everybody could have one, right? You never know where it's coming from. And so we place a high value on listening to our business lines who are directly supporting our customers like the FAA and understanding what their priorities are. They know that best in terms of their business and their mission. So they also have a sense, in Nitesh's case, a very well-defined technology architecture, especially around how to use data and how to position data in the enterprise. And so that allows us to do what we do best, right, which is to innovate around applying technologies into that mission space. And so having those priorities, having that architecture guides us in terms of our innovation where we can build demonstrable capability. I feel like we've got one of the more efficient and productive development innovation programs in terms of investing capital into innovation for the technology industry. And so bringing demonstrable capability to our customers that didn't exist last year that furthers the mission is what it's all about. But we couldn't do that without the collaboration of understanding their priorities and especially understanding the architecture of which they position technology in their mission space. And so that's an ideal form of collaboration.
Isn't it an exciting time to be a chief data officer? I mean, is it an exhausting time to be a chief data officer?
It's a very exciting time, not just because data, machine learning, AI is currently the talk. Everybody talks about it. But for aviation in particular, the aerospace industry as a whole, it is an extremely exciting time because of the level of innovation, the new kind of advanced air mobility, and the cadence for space launches have increased, and the use of airspace has kind of diversified. Lots of new use cases for the airspace. So it's an really exciting time to be in the aviation industry. As a data person, it's a wonderful opportunity to kind of shape what that future will look like. If we do the right things, we can enable innovation at a faster pace. If we make sure that data is shared, we can do this safely because aviation is a global industry. So data sharing, not just within FAA or within our partners, but info sharing, data sharing to improve safety for global aviation. All those things make it a really exciting time to be in the data space in aviation at this point. So.
I'll note as we close here, Ben, this conference hasn't been around for the past 2 years, been remote because of COVID. That lag, do you think a lot of people are going to be attending this year and amazed at the advances in this arena over the past 2.5, 3 years?
Yeah, I absolutely do, George. The last 2 or 3 years were some of the most productive years in terms of technology innovation, right? We used technology in a new way we all gravitated to Zoom and then Teams or WebEx to be able to work daily. So we learned how to work in a hybrid mode, learned how to collaborate, but also learned in a way that technology was a bigger part of that, right? And so I think that in the mission spaces, such as Nitesh operates in, it's the same thing. More research and development has been done, more application of technology has been done in the last 2 or 3 years than any of us realizes. And as I walk around today, I see an entire story, of FAA in terms of next generation usage of technology and being more collaborative, having more industry partners, accommodating different things in the airspace that haven't been in the airspace, in a safe and efficient mode. And so I think people would be surprised if they came down, and many are, in terms of what they're seeing here today, on behalf of both the FAA and the various industry segments that are here to present.
How important has that period of reflection been, Nitesh? Initially, when the pandemic hit, airlines got pretty slow. The industry was able to, I think, in a way that it hadn't had for maybe decades, step back, look at those processes, look at those operations and say, what can we do better here? Am I reading that right?
No, clearly the change in pace that COVID kind of drove made FAA, I'm sure all people, but within FAA, I can speak to the fact that it made us think about our operations differently. People who had to go to specific pieces of equipment and maintain them couldn't do that anymore that frequently. So it changed the approach to technical operations as a whole. It has changed the operations to our perspective on how systems should be tested. So there's been a fundamental change in the way we approached remote work and the ability to do some of these things remotely. It also means that as an agency, the FAA has had to react to substantial changes in volume of traffic, and it kind of speaks to the resiliency of the organization and how adept the staff it really is in kind of reacting to it. Both the downswing and the upswing requires kind of the folks to be resilient, the organization to be resilient. Now, all of this gives us an opportunity to prepare for the next one and the next one, because inevitably there will be changes. Not only will the industry kind of grow rapidly, but there will be changes in how some of these new entrants drive the NAS, how the airspace use changes. So the past 2 years has given us some of the playbook required to react to those future changes. That's what's going to be the case, right? Change is going to be the one constant. We cannot fully anticipate what kind of change, but we can put in place things which will help us react to those things a little bit better. And definitely the past 2 years has helped us do that a lot. So the experience is good.
Great look into our data-driven future. Ben, Nitesh, thanks for being here.
George, thank you very much.
Thank you, George.
To all our speakers, thanks for joining us. Thanks to GDIT for making programs like this one possible. And thank you, the audience, for tuning in. I hope you walk away from today's conversations with a few notes about implementing a secure digital transformation strategy in your organization. For GovExec TV, I'm George Jackson. Have a great day.